My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 95 years old, and people spent my whole life telling me I was an incredible mother. They were right, but no one ever asked if I was still being a good wife. For more than 40 years, everyone admired the way I raised my children. Teachers praised me, neighbors admired me. Relatives often told my husband how lucky he was to have a wife who devoted every moment to her family. Every birthday party was perfect. Every school event had my smiling face in the front row. I believed that giving my children every piece of my heart was the greatest purpose God had given me. Looking back now, I realized something painful. While everyone applauded the mother I had become, no one noticed the wife I was slowly leaving behind. Richard wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention. He never raised his voice. He never accused me of loving the children more than him. Instead, he quietly accepted every canceled dinner, every postponed vacation, and every anniversary that became just another ordinary day. At the time, I mistook his silence for understanding. It never crossed my mind that silence can sometimes hide the deepest loneliness. Our mornings belonged to school lunches. Afternoons belonged to homework. Evenings belonged to football practice, piano lessons, science fairs, and bedtime stories. Every hour had a purpose, and every purpose centered around our children. Richard and I became experts at organizing family schedules, but we slowly forgot how to simply sit together without talking about someone else's needs. Somewhere between being wonderful parents and responsible adults, we quietly stopped being best friends. On our 20th wedding anniversary, Richard reserved a small table at the same little restaurant where he had proposed to me. He even wore the blue tie I had given him years earlier. Just 2 hours before dinner, our youngest son came home upset because he'd failed an important school test. Without thinking twice, I canceled our reservation. I told Richard we'd celebrate another day. He smiled and said, "Of course." We never did. I didn't ignore Richard because I stopped loving him. I ignored him because I convinced myself there would always be another weekend, another anniversary, another quiet evening together. Every sacrifice seemed small on its own. One canceled date, one missed conversation, one forgotten kiss goodbye. None of them felt important at the time, but life has a way of collecting tiny moments until they become one enormous regret. Years passed so gradually that I never noticed the silence growing between us. We still spoke every day, but our conversations had changed. We discussed grocery lists, electricity bills, homework, and doctor's appointments. We could tell each other every detail about our children's lives, yet we rarely ask each other one simple question: how are you? Richard loved sitting on the old wooden rocking chair on our front porch every evening. He'd ask me to join him just for 10 minutes before sunset. Most evenings, I answered the same way: maybe tomorrow. I never imagined that one ordinary chair would one day become the loneliest place in my entire home. Children have a way of growing while parents are too busy noticing everything else. One moment they need help tying their shoes, the next they're asking for car keys, college applications, and permission to build lives of their own. I celebrated every milestone with pride. I never stopped to ask myself what Richard and I would become once those busy years finally ended. Our final vacation together should have been unforgettable. Instead, I spent most of it making sure everyone else was happy. I worried about sunscreen, snacks, schedules, and keeping the children entertained. Richard asked me to walk with him along the beach one evening. I promised I'd come after putting the children to bed. By the time I walked outside, he was already sitting alone, watching the stars without me. The strange thing about gentle people is that they rarely tell you when they're hurting. Richard kept smiling in family photographs. He laughed at birthdays. He applauded school plays. Anyone looking at those pictures would have believed he was the happiest man alive. Only now do I see something hidden behind every smile. A husband quietly hoping his wife would notice him again. One of the greatest lies we tell ourselves is this: we'll make time later. Later for vacations, later for conversations, later for holding hands, later for saying I love you without rushing to the next responsibility. I believed later was guaranteed. Life never promised me that. The years slipped by faster than I ever imagined. One by one, our children packed their belongings, hugged us goodbye, and stepped into lives of their own. I smiled through every farewell because that's what good mothers do. But when the front door finally closed after our youngest child left, I heard something I hadn't noticed in decades. Silence. It echoed through every room of our home. That evening, Richard made 2 cups of coffee and invited me onto the porch. For the first time in 40 years, there were no school schedules to check, no lunches to pack, and no bedtime routines waiting for us. We sat together in complete silence, staring across the fields as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Then Richard quietly whispered something that changed everything. Richard looked at me with the gentlest smile I'd ever seen and softly asked, "Eleanor, when our children needed you, you always found time. Now that they're gone," he paused for a long moment before finishing his sentence. "Do you think there's still enough time left for us?" Richard's question stayed in the air between us. I wanted to tell him that of course there was time. I wanted to promise him weekend trips, slow breakfasts, long walks, and every conversation we had postponed for years. But instead of answering him, I smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. Looking back now, I realized that silence became my answer, and it broke his heart a little more. The children had built lives of their own, yet Richard and I no longer knew how to build ours. We shared the same home, the same dining table, even the same bed, but somehow we had become polite strangers. We had spent decades talking about everyone else's dreams that we had forgotten to ask each other a simple question. What do you still dream about? Richard loved gardening. Every spring he planted roses because he knew they were my favorite flowers. One Saturday morning, he asked if I would help him plant a new rose bush near the porch. I told him I was too busy organizing family photo albums for the children. He smiled and said he'd manage alone. I never noticed that the roses were never really for the garden. They were his way of asking to spend time with me. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Richard found the old record that had played during our first dance as husband and wife. He carried it downstairs with the excitement of a young man. "Do you remember this?" he asked. I smiled without looking up from the laundry and said, "Maybe later." That record stayed on the table for weeks, untouched. Every evening, Richard still waited on the porch. Some nights I joined him for 5 minutes. Most nights, I didn't. From the kitchen window, I could see him gently rocking back and forth, watching the sunset alone. At the time, I thought I was choosing one more household chore over one quiet conversation. I had no idea I was slowly choosing loneliness. Richard wasn't asking for expensive vacations or grand adventures. He wasn't asking me to stop loving our children. He only wanted little pieces of my time. A cup of coffee before sunrise, a walk after dinner, 10 quiet minutes watching birds from the porch. Looking back now, I realize those little moments were the biggest gifts I never gave him. The children called often. They shared promotions, birthdays, new homes, and exciting plans. I celebrated every achievement as though I were still raising them. Richard always listened quietly from the other side of the room. Sometimes I noticed him smiling. Sometimes I noticed him simply waiting for our conversation to end. Our 50th wedding anniversary arrived quietly. Richard surprised me with fresh flowers and reservations at the same little restaurant where we had celebrated our first year together. That morning, our daughter called, asking if we could help babysit the grandchildren. I didn't hesitate. I canceled our reservation before Richard even came downstairs. He looked at the flowers, then gently placed them in a vase without saying a single word. A week later, while cleaning Richard's desk, I found the restaurant reservation card tucked inside one of his books. Across the back, he had written just 6 words. Maybe next year, if we're lucky. I smiled sadly and placed it back where I found it. I still believed we had all the time in the world. Not long after our anniversary, Richard began coughing more often. At first, he blamed allergies, then the weather, then old age. He laughed every time I worried about him. "I'm tougher than I look," he'd say with that familiar smile. But deep inside, I could see something changing. I just didn't want to believe it. The hospital waiting room felt strangely familiar, even though we had never sat there together before. For the first time in years, there were no children to drive somewhere, no schedules to organize, no distractions. There was only Richard, and the quiet fear of losing the one person who had been waiting for me all along. The doctor spoke gently, but every word felt heavier than the last. Richard had cancer. There were treatments, there was hope, but there were no guarantees. I looked toward my husband expecting fear. Instead, he looked at me with the same calm smile I'd known for more than 50 years. Somehow, he was comforting me, while he was the one receiving the news. For the first time in decades, I stopped saying, "maybe later." Hospital appointments replaced school schedules. Medicine bottles replaced lunch boxes. Every day I sat beside Richard's bed, wishing I could somehow trade all those busy years for one more healthy afternoon together. But time doesn't make that kind of bargain. One evening, after the nurses left, Richard looked toward the window and quietly said, "Eleanor, promise me something." I squeezed his hand and nodded. He smiled softly before continuing. "When all of this is over, don't spend the rest of your life wishing you'd loved me differently. Just love someone while you still can." The next morning, Richard asked if I could bring him one thing from home, the old wooden photo box we had filled during our first years of marriage. I smiled and promised I'd bring it the very next day. I had no idea tomorrow would arrive without him. I arrived at the hospital carrying the old wooden photo box Richard had asked for. I remember smiling as I walked through the hallway, already imagining the stories we'd laugh about together. But when I reached his room, I noticed something unusual. The nurses were standing quietly outside the door. No one needed to say a word. I knew before I stepped inside. 51 years of marriage had ended during the few hours I was gone. The photo box slipped from my hands and hundreds of memories scattered across the hospital floor. The room looked exactly the same, except for one impossible difference. Richard wasn't there. His glasses still rested on the bedside table. His favorite book remained half open. Even the coffee cup I had promised to refill was still warm enough to touch. For years, I had believed an empty house was lonely. That morning, I learned an empty hospital room could break a heart even faster. The church overflowed with people who loved Richard. Friends spoke about his kindness. Neighbors remembered his generosity. Our children cried openly while sharing stories I had never heard before. Everyone seemed to know the man I had married, yet somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to keep discovering him myself. Sitting beside his casket, I realized I had spent years knowing Richard as the father of my children, instead of the husband who still loved me every single day. After the funeral, the children stayed for a few days. We cooked together, looked through old photographs, and shared stories until late at night. Then one by one, they hugged me goodbye. They kissed my forehead, promised to visit soon, and drove back to the families waiting for them. I stood on the porch waving until every car disappeared beyond the trees. Suddenly, the farmhouse became quiet again. But this time, Richard wasn't there to share the silence with me. That evening, I prepared dinner without thinking. My hands reached for 2 plates the way they had for half a century. Halfway to the table, I stopped. One plate quietly returned to the cupboard. The other stayed on the table beside an empty chair. I had spent years believing loneliness would begin when my children left. I was wrong. Loneliness began the day there was no one left to ask how my day had been. Every evening, I found myself walking onto the porch just before sunset. Richard's rocking chair hadn't moved since the day he died. I couldn't bring myself to sit in it. Instead, I sat beside it, listening to the wind, hoping it might somehow carry one more conversation back to me. For the first time in my life, I understood why he loved this place so much. It wasn't the view he wanted to share. It was the time. Several weeks later, while organizing old papers, I discovered Richard's forgotten mobile phone. The battery barely worked. When I turned it on, one unread voice message appeared. My hands began shaking before I even pressed play. Hearing the sound of his voice again felt like opening a window into a life that no longer existed. His message was short. "Hi, sweetheart. I know you're probably busy. I just wanted to hear your voice. No rush. Call me whenever you have time. I love you." The date beneath the recording stopped my heart. He had left that message almost 3 years earlier, on an afternoon I had forgotten completely. I never called him back. For days, I replayed those 16 seconds over and over again. I wasn't haunted by what Richard had said. I was haunted by what I hadn't done. It wasn't one missed phone call. It was thousands of little moments, all quietly waiting for me to notice them before time ran out. Christmas arrived without Richard for the first time in 52 years. The children invited me to spend the holidays with them, but I wanted to stay home. Every ornament on our tree carried a memory. Every decoration reminded me of the man who had quietly hung them beside me every December. I finally understood that traditions are never really about decorations. They're about the people standing next to you. One snowy afternoon, I opened every photo album we owned. Thousands of pictures filled the table. Birthdays, graduations, family vacations, weddings. Every important milestone was there. Then I noticed something I had never seen before. In almost every photograph, Richard was looking at me, while I was looking at the children. The truth arrived slowly, one photograph at a time. Richard had never stopped choosing me, even when I forgot to choose him back. He waited beside the porch. He planned anniversaries. He planted roses. He kept asking for ordinary moments because ordinary moments were where he found happiness. I was too busy searching for the future to notice the beautiful life sitting beside me. People often ask me if I regret loving my children so much. The answer is no. Loving them was never the mistake. My mistake was believing that love only grows when you give it to your children. I forgot that marriages need attention too. I forgot that husbands quietly grow lonely while pretending everything is all right. That evening, I carried 2 fresh roses to Richard's grave. I sat there until sunset and made him one final promise. I couldn't give him back the years I had lost, but I could spend whatever years I had left reminding other families not to repeat my mistake. If even one couple chose each other because of our story, then perhaps Richard's quiet love would continue changing lives. As I stood to leave, I noticed something tucked beneath the flowers already resting against Richard's grave. It was an old white envelope with my name written across the front in his handwriting. My heart stopped. Richard had left me one final letter, and I had never known it existed. My hands trembled so badly I could barely open the envelope. It wasn't a long letter, just a few pages, folded carefully, as if Richard already knew one day I'd need every single word inside. Before I even reached the first sentence, my tears had already blurred the ink. Somehow, after all these years, his voice had found its way back to me. The first word stole every breath from my chest. My dearest Eleanor. Not dear Eleanor, not to my wife, my dearest Eleanor. For 51 years, I had always been his dearest Eleanor, even when I forgot how to be his closest friend. Richard wrote that he had never blamed me for loving our children so deeply. He admired the mother I became. He was proud of every sacrifice I made for them. Then came the sentence that shattered me. I never wanted less love for them. I only wished for a little more time with you. He wrote about the anniversary dinners, the roses, the walks, the mornings with 2 cups of coffee. None of them were grand romantic gestures. They were invitations. Invitations to keep choosing each other, long after the children no longer needed us. I declined almost every one. Then I reached the page that broke me completely. Richard confessed that he had only feared one thing: not dying, not cancer, not pain. His greatest fear was leaving this world before we found each other again. He never wanted to die as strangers, living inside the same marriage. That evening, I carried Richard's letter home. For the very first time, I sat in his rocking chair, the same chair I had ignored for years. As I rocked gently back and forth, I finally understood why he had loved that place so much. It wasn't about watching sunsets. It was about sharing them. The next morning, I called each of my children, not to ask about work, not to ask about money. I asked one simple question. When was the last time you and your husband or your wife had dinner together without the children? There was silence on every call, the same silence I had lived with for decades. My daughter called me back that evening. She was crying. She admitted that she and her husband hadn't gone anywhere alone in almost 6 years. She whispered, "Mom, I think I'm becoming you." That sentence hurt, but it also gave me hope. Maybe my mistake could still save someone else's marriage. A few weeks later, all 3 of my children came home for Sunday dinner. But this time, I did something different. After dessert, I smiled and gently told every grandchild, "Go outside and play." Then I looked at my children and their spouses. "Now talk to each other, the way your father always wanted your mother and me to." As I watched my children laugh with their husbands and wives, I realized something beautiful. Richard was still teaching our family, even though he was no longer sitting at the table. Love has a remarkable way of continuing when someone chooses to live its lesson. People often ask me what my greatest regret is. It isn't missing vacations. It isn't canceled anniversaries. It isn't forgotten dates. My greatest regret was believing my marriage could survive on leftovers. I gave Richard whatever time remained after everyone else had taken theirs. Love doesn't grow that way. If you're raising children today, love them with everything you have. Attend every school play. Celebrate every achievement. Hold them tightly. But before you turn out the lights each night, remember the person standing beside you. Your children are watching how you love each other. That lesson may shape their future more than anything you ever say. Every spring now, I plant one new rose beside the porch. Not because Richard can see them, but because every flower reminds me of something I learned too late. Love isn't measured by sacrifice alone. It's measured by presence. Every Sunday evening, I still visit Richard. I read him a page from my favorite book. I tell him about the grandchildren. I tell him about the roses. And before I leave, I always whisper the words I should have said years ago. Thank you for waiting for me. I'm 95 years old, and if my story teaches you only, well, let it be this. Raise your children with all your heart, but never stop choosing who chose you first. When that day, your children make sure the chair beside you isn't empty because you forgot the love that was always waiting there.